For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
Okay, looks like we are live. It's definitely an honor to be interviewing Stef Hereema here today. This is going to be really, really great, guys. I want to thank everybody in the audience for joining us. We're going to make this interactive, so make sure you're tagging me. I am going to be watching the chat the entire time. I'll save as many questions as I can. And as well, we plan to ask questions throughout the interview and discussion ourselves. So we are discussing today the global flood, but in particular salt domes and flood geology and the awesome work Stef has been doing on this subject. So Stef, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate you giving us your time.
Yeah, thank you, I would say.
No problem. Nope, this is going to be awesome. We're really, really pumped. So we've also got Matt here and George Bond. So guys, thanks for being here as well. They are going to help out in this interview. We're going to make it interactive. We got a video. We're going to be taking questions. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a fun day. Guys, thanks for being here. George, can you hear us, brother?
Yes, I can hear you. Yep.
I just want to make sure you guys are good. And Matt, I know you're on. Okay, so before we get into it, though, I want to introduce our special guest today, Stef J. Hereema. He holds a BSc in aircraft engineering. He is a board member of Logos Institute and Forum C. Now, Stef, once I'm done this, of course, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. Both of these organizations, from my understanding, are in the Netherlands. He was involved with heat treatment processes in molten salt and commercial steam installations. Later, he was posted to the UK with Renko for the engineering of a uranium enrichment plant. As a self-employed consultant, he investigated the feasibility of a salt mine in the Netherlands. He lectures on the topic of salt formations and flood geology. Actually, we posted a lecture from Stef about a week ago to prepare you guys for today's discussion and interview. I really enjoyed it. We all did. So he shows that the salt pillars around the world can be explained by the interaction of a melted salt magma with the waters of the worldwide flood. Now, as in 2014, the Dead Sea Scrolls were exhibited in his hometown. Stef organized a conference on the trustworthiness of the Bible. The presentations are available on YouTube. Apart from the Dutch speakers, he invited some international known speakers who presented in English. A few of those being Professor Leonard Brand, Paleontology from a Biblical Worldview, as well as a presentation from the same professor, Leonard Brand, on the global flood and flood geology. Dr. Mike Ord on, looks like, two different topics: Earth's surface shaped by receding floodwater, as well as dinosaur tracks, eggs, and scavenged bone beds explained early in the flood. Dominic Statham, he lectured on migration after the flood, as well as biblical creation or Darwin's theory, which is more scientific, as well as Professor Art Chadwick, Dr. John Baumgartner, who looks like he lectured on helium's testimony, it's a young earth after all, and Dr. Harold Binder, if I'm saying that correctly, on the origin of life. Stef, I want to hand that over to you. I know that was a lengthy intro, but if you wanted to correct me on anything or just add anything as well for the audience and for the guests, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, especially this exhibition of the Dead Sea Scrolls in my hometown. It was amazing. I heard it a couple of years before that it was coming my way. And, well, I was doing a lot of salt research in that time, and I thought I have to do something with these Dead Sea Scrolls. You can imagine we had the oldest written record of Genesis 1 verse 1 was exhibited here in the museum. And also some very old written verses about the flood. So I had to do something, and so that was awesome that so many people were able to come over to come here, and well, it was very good. We had a lot of media response, hit the papers, and well, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Steph, we're really excited for this. Once again, we want to thank you for giving us your time today. So why don't we get right into it? I'm going to hand it over to George. George, you're muted, brother. So just make sure that you unmute yourself before you say your first words here. George, go ahead.
Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I believe we've got quite a few time zones in the chat. But one positive out of this COVID-19, if there could be a positive, is it's really given me some time to do some research. My introduction to Steph goes back, probably six or so months. I really can't tell because of, we feel like prisoners in our own home. But I really started to do some research on some of these assertions that the atheists kept putting forward about oil exploration. Not knowing much about it, I just wanted to do my own research and find out about whether that was true or not. I began to do some research on the internet, and for some reason, I don't know why, I just went into the images to find out about oil and where it's found, and I noticed all these salt domes. Wherever I saw an oil deposit, for some reason, I just kept seeing these salt domes. So, of course, being inquisitive, I wanted to find out more about what these salt domes were, because looking at the shape of them, I just couldn't see how that shape could be formed in a uniformitarian deep time scenario. Okay, that led me to some videos that I found on YouTube that Steph had shown, and in turn that led me to some articles that he'd written for CMI. I then contacted Steph and started a dialogue going, and originally I invited him to Neff's channel. He presented some information there, but I thought we needed to go into it a bit deeper. That's why I decided to probably do this under probably a part 3 series. This is part 2, by the way. Part 1 was the lecture that Standing mentioned that was aired about a couple of weeks ago. But Steph reminds me of what I think every scientist should do. They should investigate, and it's in line with what the Bible actually says to us. In Job 37, I'm quoting the King James Version here. Verse 7, he says, "He sealeth up the hand of every man, that all men may know his work." Verse 14 says, "Hearken unto this, O Job, stand still and consider the wondrous works of God." Okay, as I mentioned, this is part 2 of probably 3 or maybe 4 lectures, interviews with Steph. He's also now a valuable member of our team here at Standing for Truth. Let's see. Part 3 will probably be on a recent paper that he prepared with one of his colleagues, and I believe it's now peer reviewed. The article of that paper is called "The Marsupial Fossil Record and How It's Not Compelling Evidence for the KPG Flood Boundary." I believe there's a link to that paper in the description below the title of the video. Okay, as I mentioned, the thing that got me interested was the constant assertion by atheists that it takes all Earth geology to undertake fossil fuel exploration. So I prepared a little video of some illustrations that I picked out of some research that I did, and I thought if we play that video, we can actually pause it after whichever illustration you want to, Steph, and we can talk about the details. But what I'd like to point to the audience is please take note on the shape of these salt domes, the location of the fossil fuels, and the layers that are adjacent these salt domes. So Matt, if you'd like to play that video, and Steph, please pause any one of those that you'd like, and we'll talk about it in further detail. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
These are some drilling wells around some known salt domes. Can you pause it there, Matt? The reason I put that is to show you. Obviously, that's a pillar, salt pillar, that's been eroded. But I just wanted to show you the actual shape of it. Some people that I've spoken to have mentioned that these salt pillars are the result of salt penetrating through cracks in the substructure. And I'd like to say that's a funny looking crack. It's quite vertical and round in shape. So I can't see how that could be a crack in the underlying substructure.
Yeah.
You have any comments to make on that one, Steph?
No, that's a good observation. If it's circular, then it's not a crack. Yeah. We'll expand
Matt.
on that later.
Notice the layers adjacent that dome there. Okay. Steph, you want to? Okay, that's just some locations of salt domes. I believe I don't know where that location is. It's too small on my screen. Can you read that?
No, I can't read it either. I think it's the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Gulf of Mexico, yeah. Just pause it there, Matt. The thing I want you to note there is Steph can probably talk about how this process actually works, but you'll notice at the base of all those layers is the salt layer, and how it's injected through that substructure. And note, according to uniformitarian assumptions, those layers should be solid rock, and I can't see how that salt dome could inject itself through solid rock and have those layers deform in that way. So, Steph, you want to make a few comments on that at all, or?
Yeah, well, this is exactly what we're talking about. How could these salt domes rise up through these sediments? And so the secular geologists, they say this was all solid rock. There was solid salt and there was solid sedimentary rock on top of it, and then the miracle happened. However, solid rock cannot bend. So, and you see this rock has been bended. And the other thing is solid rock cannot flow like a fluid. So they are having a problem here. And, well, I will go deeper in that later, but yeah.
Okay.
continue.
Now, note the shape of that dome. I couldn't possibly imagine how that could form under uniformitarian assumptions.
Yeah.
Just pause it there, please.
Oh, yeah, pause it there.
Yeah, you'll notice in that illustration the location of all those fossil fuel deposits, and I'm sure Steph will talk about that caprock above the salt dome. So Steph, take it yourself, please, and just talk about that particular illustration.
Yeah, well, the thing is here, I want you to look at this sinking bottom on top of this salt rock, this salt pillar. Secular geologists, they tell us that this salt pillar is rising up. But what we see on top of it is a sinking. We see a sinking bottom. The surface on top of the caprock is coming down. Do you see that?
Yes.
And so what happened here is contradicting to the theory. And as well, in the introduction, Standing mentioned already, I've shown with my papers that salt is an igneous rock. It's a volcanous, primary igneous volcanous rock. And that means that this salt was a liquid when it came up, and in a liquid form it is from a lower density, and it's protruding into liquid layers of sediment. So it's all mud. Everything we see here, it was mud when when this pillar rose up, and after solidification of the salt, the density of the salt increased, because in a liquid salt is from a lower density and a higher volume than a solidified salt. That's quite well 25% or so. So the volume of the salt pillar is decreasing after solidification. And that's what you see here. You see that the top layer, the layers on top of this salt rock, it came down after original formation.
So as the magmatic salt rose through those layers, it cooled and its density became greater as it cooled.
Yeah.
And that's why it's formed that caprock at the top.
No, it's the layers above the caprock. The layers above the caprocks here, you see it came down.
Okay,
yeah. And this shrinking, so secular geologists, they say this pillar comes up and it's continuously coming up, but we see it goes down because it came down at the end of the formation, because when it solidified, the layers on top of it came down. Now the salt itself shrinked, and therefore the layers on top of it came down. So there's one thing I've more to say about this picture. There's also this caprock. This caprock is formed there out of by evaporation of water, of the waters of the flood, because the caprock contains calcium carbonate. It's a chalk, mainly it's chalk and calcium sulfate, and it's very typical for salt domes. They all have such a caprock, and well, there's just a cap that's caused by the interaction with the waters of the flood. So it's again, it's again a confirmation that we are dealing here with the flood instead of slow processes like what secular geologists have to say about it. And then there is this oil and gas, because all these dark shaded profiles, there is oil and also gas. Gas is not shown here, it's all shown as oil, but it could also be gas in there. But there are the mud layers of the flood. They consisted out of sand and clay layers. Well, the clay is forming a cap, a kind of a. It's not. Yeah, it's also called a caprock. It's forming a seal where the fossil fuels can't pass. So this sand layers, therein is the gas and oil formed, and then the water in the sand layers, because sand do have a high porosity, this water will pressurize the gas and the oil upwards, because oil and gas will float on water, and then it will flow upwards and upwards until it's trapped between the salt and the clay layer on top of it. So yes,
I was just going to add, Steph. The other interesting point is we all know that oil can be actually formed through a process of heat. So I'm assuming the magmatic salt would be hot, and that would provide the heat to the organic materials and the pressure from the strata that's above it to actually turn it into an oil product. Is that correct?
That's exactly what happened during the flood. You had all these sedimentary layers of the flood that were filled with organics. And all the flora and fauna from the pre-flood world was in it. So when it became trapped in the mud of the flood, and then it was heated up by the intrusion of this eruption of salt, then it was transformed into oil and gas very rapidly. There were no millions of years required. This is a process that can happen in hours. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Continue.
Yes.
Actually, before you continue, Matt, if you could pause that real quick. Yeah, I'm loving this. I mean, what we see today in terms of, say, present processes, uniformitarian processes, cannot explain the geology of the Earth. It can't even begin to explain what we actually see. So this is awesome. And George, I wanted to point out, too, that we've got a few questions coming through. So the audience is lively. We've got a lot of people in the chat with some questions. Did you want me to go through a couple of those questions now?
Oh yeah,
George,
go ahead. Yeah, no,
okay.
Let's make it interactive.
Okay, I'll do a couple just because the questions are flying by so fast. If we go too long, I think I'll lose them. So let's do a couple, and then we'll make it like you said, interactive. And then let's see. So we got Luca here. Liquid sodium chloride.
Oh yeah.
It's even possible. How? What conditions are required? He asks in brackets. He says, ask to Harima. Sorry for my typos. Is that a question you'd like to answer, Steph?
Yeah, it's good. Well, I've made it myself, liquid sodium chloride. You can just melt it. It has a melting point at about 800 degrees Celsius. And then it becomes as thin like water. It's thin like water. It runs like water. It's it's very good possible to liquefy it. And if you add other salts to it, the melting point will come down, because no, that's not a question. But liquid sodium chloride, yes, it can.
Awesome. That's an awesome answer. Okay, so let's see right here. Lena Powell asks, what is the secular explanation when rocks bend? For rocks bending?
Yeah, the secular explanation is that these rocks were all buried under 10 kilometers of sedimentary rock. And with the weight of all that sediment, 10 kilometers weight of rock, that's amazing. And then by plate tectonics and also salt tectonics, this bending could happen. In their opinion, and very slow. It will take many millions of years. However, the point is, those 10 kilometers of rock on top of this is missing. There is nothing.
Right,
The surface where we live. Yeah.
Well, it's problem after problem for the uniformitarian, so.
It is.
Okay, so this one as well, let's see. Jungle Jargon asks, SFT, how much study has been done on the sediment layers below the great unconformity, and what has been disproved about them?
Oh, that's not, I don't know, the great unconformity. Yes, that's Grand Canyon, I think so. I'm not informed about this, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And I think the other question that was here, let's see here. Tony Reed asks, are there any companies that have ever used Mr. Hereema's model to predict where they will find a new oil deposit or salt dome?
Yeah. Well, I owned my own engineering company. So I certainly tried to attract some companies, and I did presentations for 3 big mining companies like CaCO3 and Netmag. Well, Netmag is a small one, but they are in for magnesium chloride, which is a salt in the salt formations. And also Frisia. Frisia is looking for sodium chloride by solution mining. And I tried to well, I did some sales there with some presentations to hire me in, but their secular geologist, of course, didn't quite. I couldn't overrun them. However, I did this presentation. I started it with Netmag, and then they say, this is so interesting. We will invite you to a 3 parties meeting where the 3 mining companies were together, and I've presented it there in the boardroom of Frisia in front of the directors. So yes, I did my best, but no, the secular geologists in their companies, they didn't allow my views.
Of course, given their bias and their basic presuppositions and uniformitarian assumptions, that's not a surprise, but you've done a great job. Your presentations have been phenomenal. So George, if you had anything to add, and I guess we can move on. I think I just grabbed all the questions we had so far, so we are up to date.
Yeah, well, just continue with the video. I think there's a few more illustrations to come.
Nice composition, George.
Thank you. I was trying to incorporate some of the things that you were saying about how those salt domes could be injected into that form by overburden pressure on either side of it, and it's been squeezed up through the layers.
Yeah.
These are some applications
for.
Yeah.
This is solution mining, what you see. They drill in it and then bring water in it and then dissolute it, and then the water with a high volume of salt will come out, and then they have to dry it, and there's your salt.
So that's a method to extract it and bring it back to the surface.
Yes, yes.
Again, you'll notice the oil traps either side of that salt dome.
Yes, again, yeah. Yeah. Now, this overview gives the impression that the oil is always in oil traps surrounding the salt domes, but that's not true. There is a lot of oil and gas in the subsurface, subsalt, because the salt formation itself underneath is a very good trap.
I was going to mention that, Steph, I've got a map at the very end of this video, and I'm not suggesting that the oil that was found has been associated with the salt domes, but in most of the illustrations that I've seen, you'll note there are oil traps near those salt domes. But yes, you're correct, and the I think the final illustration at the very end of this short video will show locations of some of these fossil fuels. That's the one there, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nice to see we've got Tony Reid in the chat, because I had quite a long discussion with him. I can't recall which video we were commenting on, but yeah, we had a lively discussion. We disagreed, of course, but hey, what's new?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we will expand on this question about whether companies that are interested in my because I've something more to say about it. It will come up later. Yeah. Yeah, these salt domes are amazing. You don't notice the scale from this, but some of these salt domes are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kilometers high.
Yeah, they're massive.
They're massive, yeah. And it's not just the salt that is fluid-like, it's also the sedimentary rock surrounding it. It has given the space for this salt dome to rise up. So it shows that also the sedimentary rock surrounding it was in a liquid phase. It's impossible to create a bulb fissure.
Well, that's what got me interested in the beginning, Steph. I couldn't imagine how that salt dome could form in such a way through solid rock.
Exactly, that's the problem here. And it's largely ignored by secular geologists, this problem. And we talk about sometimes these salt domes, they can contain tens of cubic kilometers of salt. It's really huge.
I was reading last night about the uses of the magnesium chloride, Steph. It was something I didn't know before, but it's used as an additive to normal salt to prevent icing on the road?
Yes.
One of its uses, that is.
Yes, one of it, yeah. But I've heard that magnesium chloride also is used in swimming. No, how do you say that? Sorry, I don't know the words. Well, you have this safety device. When you jump in the water, you need a safety device. And in airplanes, you have these things. They are the inflatables. When you jump, when your airplane has to land on the water, well, that's probably, then there's it's a big problem. But then you have to go out with your inflatable on. Then it will inflate immediately when it hits the water, and that's done by magnesium chloride, because it will dissolute that fast that then the device will inflate. Well, forget about that. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But these are massive plugs coming up, and there is no mountain on top of it. So, so that shows again there is the sediment acted like mud. It was just giving way. I'll stop it over here, please. Here you see this. This is a set of several pillars that can be formed, that have been found all over the world, and we found these pillars all over the world in the subsurface. But they can be up to 10 kilometers high, and well, we all know about plate tectonics. That's when complete continents are on the move, driven on the mantle. However, what we see here is very local. It has nothing to do with plate tectonics. The plates are in the subsurface lower than the salt. This is pure salt tectonics. Salt tectonics is something what highly differs from plate tectonics. And you see this unidirectional flow that's required, because these pillars, they require to be fed with salt from unidirectional, from all directions, to get this huge amount of salt leveled up.
Yeah, that image there is what got me interested to do further research, because I couldn't imagine how that image could actually form through uniformitarian processes.
Yeah. Oh, I see the question. Could these salt domes contribute to the increase in salt in the oceans? Yes, this could, because this very earth has been created by God in a freshwater volume, in a freshwater condition. And the flood was a freshwater condition. It was all freshwater out of the, it was the water with what the paradise was watered, because it was.
That image there, Steph,
yes,
shows the salt effectively capping, I think it's gas,
yes,
a gas deposit below it.
Yeah. Here in the Netherlands, we do have the biggest storage of gas in the subsurface of Western Europe. It's nearby here. And that gas is sealed underneath a salt layer. It is, well, I've modeled it. It is my own drawing. I just modeled it. But this is how we win our gas, and we're now quitting this because it's causing earthquakes by further emptying this storage. Oh, I see a question. We have oil for only 50 more years. I don't think that's true. I think we can go on for much longer. I don't know. I didn't count it, but.
Can you stop it there, Matt? That map shows the location of fossil fuels and their association with salt domes. As Steph mentioned earlier, that's not to say that's the only fossil fuel they found. There's obviously, at the base of Australia, there's the Bass Strait. That's not shown, but that map only shows fossil fuel associated with salt domes. So I just want to make that clarification for everyone, so that they're not confused that oil is only associated wherever we find salt domes.
No, but it's mostly, most times it's associated with salt, and
Is there a percentage, Steph, that you know of? What percentage of oil and gas deposits are found near these salt structures?
yeah, the point is how will you count? The geologists, the secular geologists, they don't count the oil on top of salt, because they say, well, there's nothing to do with the salt, and they say you can only count the oil and gas which is sealed by salt. And I don't agree with that, because what we see is that the flood delivered tens of kilometers of multiple kilometers of mud on top of each other. And then there was this eruption of salt, this massive eruption of salt. There are millions of kilometers of salt erupted into these sedimentary basins, and which changed all the organic material into oil and gas. So also the layers on top of the salt have been heated by this salt. And so there is some confusing what oil and gas can you count, and I count it all, and then you come up to nearly everything, because every sedimentary basin is normally you can find salt layers in every sedimentary basin, and in every sedimentary basin there you can find salt of oil and gas.
Yep.
It looks like we have a question here. Lucas says, hi, can Steph tell if the earth was covered only with fresh water? There is some proof for that,
Yeah.
question mark. So maybe he's asking for some evidence. Also, in this model, salt comes from below the earth, question mark?
Yeah, that's for certain. The salt comes from below the earth. That's quite, we see it.
Right, yeah.
So that's quite easy, but this about the fresh water, that's something I want to cover in my next presentation, but it has to do with many observations. To start with Revelation, where we see that when everything is reformed in the way, well, we know that we have this good creation, the fall, and Jesus Christ made it all right, and now we are looking for this moment that everything will become like it was planned with this good creation. Now, in Revelation, there we see that living water will float the earth again. So from that, you can say that fresh water has been made in the beginning as well, because that's what we are heading to. We are heading for this living water coming from beneath the throne of God out of Jerusalem. So that's a theological thing. We have also the observation that the oceans become saltier and saltier and saltier. And that's because they were less saltier in the beginning. They were fresh in the beginning.
Yeah,
and that's a problem for uniformitarianism, because if the Earth is billions of years old, then the oceans would really be so salty that nothing could really survive.
Yes, it's true.
I'm not sure if this one's a rhetorical question, and great answer to that one, Steph. I completely agree. That was really, I like how you gave a theological basis for it and a scientific basis for it. So that's really good. This one here, Mountain Hours. This might be, they named it fossil fuels to brainwash us with high prices. Is this true? Question mark.
I don't know what the high prices have to do with fossil fuels, but yeah, I think I've paid too much, but that's all tax what we pay.
Actually, here's one. Let's see here. Vitala says, so the salt flats we find in areas of the earth, might those be from salt domes, which broke through the surface and spread over the dry, arid ground?
Yeah, that's a good question, but this is a bit confusing here. The point is, these salt domes and these salt layers from a primary igneous origin, they sit everywhere. They sit very deep in the subsurface, but they also sit high up in the mountains. We find them high up in the Himalaya. We find them high up in America, in some mountains. And when they catch rainwater, they will dissolute, and you will see salt rivers coming down from these mountains. And these salt rivers, they then come in an area, in a basin, and if this basin is not is a dry basin, and these salt flats, what we're talking about in this question, these salt flats, we find them in very dry areas, in a desert environment. So this salt water from high, out of the Andes, for example, this salt water comes down in a desert, and then the water evaporates, and the salt flat will left behind. But this is a secondary process, what we are observing here. So you have this primary process, the salt delivered by an eruption of volcanic magma high up in the mountains. And then there is the secondary process, the rain comes and dissolves it, brings it to a desert environment, and then you will end up with a salt flat. And these salt flats are only a meter thick or something. It's not very huge. The salt layers hidden in the subsurface, they can be thick, like 2-3 kilometers thick sometimes. Those volumes are enormous. This salt formation on top I live is 500,000 cubic kilometers thick. Volume. The volume is 500,000 cubic kilometers. It reaches from the coast of United Kingdom unto the Baltic states and Poland, which is an area with a length of 1,700 kilometers. It's enormous. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're at the end of the short video. In summary, Steph, my investigations show that old Earth geology is not really required to do fossil fuel exploration. I sort of group this into 4 different criteria. It's mostly about the rock strata, the type of rock, the rock distribution, and the geometry of the strata. And that's really what some of the creationist geologists have also said in a book. I think it's the 50th anniversary edition of the Genesis Flood book, page 249, authors John Whitcomb and Henry Morris. I won't read the entire quote, but I'll read part of it. It says, such techniques as have actually been found helpful in exploration do not really depend upon the historical aspects of geology at all, but only on recognition of the structural and sedimentary markers that experience has shown are associated with such deposits. Further on, it says sequence stratigraphy does have a long age assumption built into it, but that is not particularly significant to the method, which is basically a geometric method. In all of these methods, time is irrelevant in the analysis. It's mostly about rock strata, type of rock distribution, and geometry. So I reckon that pretty much falsifies the atheists' claim that you need earth geology to find these fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's great, George. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because you constantly hear them saying it. I mean, you hear RJ Downard say it. You hear Tony Reed, who was in the chat earlier, say it. Erica says it. They just kind of repeat and parrot that same argument. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that too, Steph?
Well, we didn't find oil and gas in the Netherlands by historical geology. We didn't find them by seismic, by gathering seismic data and make interpretations of this data, and by exploration drillings to conform the seismic data. And from that you find the traps where you can expect a trap, and that's where we drill and then find the oil and the gas. It has nothing to do with the story what they read in the strata. The history is totally a thing apart. It has nothing to do with finding oil and gas.
Yeah, I can sort of summarize that that criteria that I mentioned, the rock strata, the type of rock, the rock distribution, and the geometry, can easily be accounted for in the global flood geology scenario. In actual fact, this is my opinion, the salt domes actually provide another piece of evidence that substantiates the Bible in the global flood.
Mm-hmm. It is.
So, Steph, now we're into some of our own questions. Some of these might have already been asked, but I'll just go through some of them.
I can ask this first one if you want, George. I think this is going to be a
go
good
ahead.
one. Okay, so Steph, as the viewers here may not fully understand your theory on the formation of these salt domes, can you explain your theory on the formation of salt domes and how exactly this shows evidence for the global flood of Noah, the Genesis flood, of course?
Yeah, well, I have shown that, of course, in my first presentation, what you broadcasted. How do we say that? 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So I don't know if it's worth to do that all again, but can I share my screen?
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
While you're doing that, Steph, I'll just add, in all of my investigation, I've never found anyone that actually says, while drilling through some of these salt domes, they never find fossils of any type. You'd expect shells and such things to be fossilized if it took if these things took billions of years to form. I'm not sure if that's correct, but my investigation shows that they never find shells in these salt domes.
Oh, that's correct. They never fell. Their story, indeed, is that this salt is the result of evaporation process. So they call it evaporites, and they write very thick books about it. This is one of them. Can you see the title? Evaporites.
Yeah, evaporates.
Yeah.
Yep.
So. However, this story they made up is not valid. We don't see these fossils. It's a strange thing, a strange observation that this salt doesn't contain fossils, whereas the sediments surrounding the salt, therein you find the fossil fuels and the fossils, but you don't find it in the salt. So that's already showing that the sediments, they came from the flood and were filled with flora and fauna, which was turned into fossils and fossil fuels. And the salt, that is from a volcanic origin and does not contain fossils. I don't know, did I share my screen now or didn't I? Do you see my screen?
Steph, so just make sure. So the easiest way to do it is click, when you click the share screen, it's the fourth button down on the bottom. Make sure you click the middle. A little box will show up. Click that and then click share. And then it'll pop up for me and I can approve it. But I don't see anything just yet, which means you might just be missing that final step. So for example, when I click share screen, you'll see something pops up that says your entire screen. Make sure you click that middle box. And then what happens is the little share button on the bottom, it'll highlight blue. And then you got to click that and we should be good.
Well, the point is I share my screen, but it's not working.
Do you see, I can show you. So for example, I'm going to share my screen and I'll show you. So when I share my screen, so you should be able to, so if you can see my screen at the bottom here, 1, 2, 3. So the fourth button, it'll say share screen. So you click that and then a window will pop up in here in the middle. You got to make sure you click the window in the middle. It'll be another box and then you can share. So you kind of got to do two shares.
I'll try it
So
again. I share my screen.
Try it again.
Now but there is nothing in the middle here. It doesn't. I can only share. Sorry. Okay, advanced. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay, Steph. If it's not working, that I mean, there's not much we can do. Is okay. George, does it work for you, brother, on your end?
I'm on my tablet, so I don't have
so it'll be
the functions that you've just shown.
And you're on so Steph, if you could, so if you were able to see what I saw, as long as you click the fourth button, which is just says share screen, do you see, when you click that button, do you see a screen pop up that says your entire screen, application window, Chrome tab? There should be 3 options that it gives you. Do you see that at all, Steph?
Yeah, I've now seen it. I can see the app fencer, so I check for the app.
No, so make sure you're on the entire screen. Yeah, there we go.
You've got it now.
Okay, perfect.
That's it.
There we go. You're good to go. You're good to go.
Yeah. Well, I've shown this before in 2 weeks ago but.
Well, I will say, Steph, even seeing it again, to be honest with you, is really helpful. And the evidence is so powerful that we don't mind, going through a few slides and going over it briefly. So take your time, Steph.
Okay. Well, what I've showed in a paper, in several papers already, is that we are dealing with salt magma, molten salt from a high temperature, which is erupted into a huge amount of mud, so that the flood delivered many kilometers thick layers of of mud, and then the salt was erupted into it. Now, what we see here is the hydrodynamics, the hydrodynamic behavior of non-miscible fluids. When you have water and an oil, there's two fluids that don't like each other. So the oil will float on top of the water. But if the oil is underneath the water, somehow you create, in a laboratory, you create a test with oil underneath water, then this oil is unstable in that position because it's less dense. It will rise up very fast. And in a laboratory in Los Alamos National Laboratory, they have tested that, and they had a high-speed camera to show what happens. This oil will rise up very fast, and you see even that there is some turbulence surrounding it, and then on top you see this characteristic result of turbulence. And now here, this salt canopy, well, that's how it's called. That's a geologic term, but here you see at the North Cape in Norway, there is this 5 kilometer high salt dome, salt pillar that rose up and has been frozen in this position, which is identical to what we see in the tests in a laboratory. So I think this is very powerful evidence, powerful observation that shows up that everything here was liquid. The mud layers in which the salt rose up, and also the salt itself, they both were liquid, and in a liquid phase the salt rose up and froze in this position. And then it that's how we find it now. And sometimes these vertical salt dome is that thin that it's even totally gone, and then it's reported as a vertical salt welt. And so that's also a term we find in geology. When we talk about vertical salt welts or also horizontal salt welts, then this salt did pass there and was totally gone the moment it froze. So it can become very thin. And this, I think, it delivers powerful evidence for us that we're talking about a flood, and this is one watery catastrophe, a huge catastrophe with a huge amount of mud and a huge amount of volcanic eruptions, and it's all in one catastrophe delivered. And now you see in these sediment layers of sometimes tens of kilometers thick layers of sediment, they are all dated by evolutionists, and the lower the layer, the older it becomes. But here you see they are all tied together in one catastrophe. So there is no difference in timescale in low in the subsurface or higher up. This is all from the same moment in time that this was formed.
Powerful evidence.
Thank you, George.
I think the next question, SFT, I think we've already covered it. So I'll touch up on the next question. We all know that when young Earth creationists ever bring up evidence for a young Earth, we always get the deniers and the critics. I'm sure, Steph, you've heard some of those arguments. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about some of the arguments that people or critics have put against your scenarios?
Yeah, that's interesting one. Well, there is, of course, there is many many disputes with people.
I know. Reading the CMI website, there was one particular critic. There's no need to mention his name, but he had a few things to say about it, and you wrote a refutation to that as well.
Yeah, that's worth to read through this because that was amazing. He had many things to say, and he was answered on every single subject.
Oh, that's awesome. Isn't that funny though? But then I find what they'll do, Steph, after you've answered every single one of their objections, they'll go back to what's called the drawing board and try and come up with a few more. Then they'll bring those, and then you'll address those, and it's just this never-ending, game. Because at the end of the day, they can address this evidence. It's fascinating. People in the chat are really loving this stuff, and you're doing some phenomenal work. So I do think that's a good question from George. If you wanted to take your time on that one, I'm going to. George, can you pull up that article from CMI and either give it to me in the private chat or something like that? I'm going to post it in the description box for people to read.
I think I've got most of those articles, and they're provided in the description, SFT. Yeah. But if they're not, I'll put them in the comment section later on.
There already. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure the CMI one was there. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what they say is that there is abundant laboratory data that shows that salt can flow like a fluid. Although it's solid, in solid form, it can flow like a fluid. And indeed, I have to admit, there is data that shows it. However, this is such an example, and I will not go through it now. I will. It's very complicated, but I've summarized it here. So, in a laboratory, they have shown the salt creep under a differential stress of more than 133 megapascal per meter. So what they do, if you, I go back to here. You see here this example, this test example. They put some small pillar of salt and they put pressure on it. And then they take a holiday and they go away for a half year or so, or some months. But they put pressure on it. The weight of about half a kilometer of rock, that's the pressure, what we're talking about. And then this small pillar of salt, then slowly, very slowly, it takes months, transforms a bit. And it becomes a bit thicker. And well, that is the experimental data. That's abundant available, indeed, this data. However, this creep, because this is a salt creep, what's shown, under this huge differential stress, causes a displacement of only 1 centimeter. So you have a huge amount of stress, differential stress, and only a displacement of 1 centimeter. But the actual situation, in reality, we are talking about a huge amount of salt that has been displaced. And this salt, to form a pillar rising up, the salt is in the subsurface sometimes had to flow over 25 kilometers. So the displacement in reality, we talk about 25 kilometers to display, not 1 centimeter, but 25 kilometers in horizontal direction. And then 10 kilometers up, and then another. Well, it's amazing the amount of displacement has to be done. And the point is, over these 25 kilometers, and you can say, well, there was some a layer of sediments on top of it, on top of the salt, that push the salt away sideways into this pillar, this situation, the actual situation, delivers only a thousandth of a megapascal per meter. So they do tests with over 103 megapascal per meter, while the actual situation can deliver only 0.001 megapascal per meter. Do you understand this enormous difference?
Well,
And
the discrepancy there is 300,000 million. That's a big discrepancy.
yes, this factor, discrepancy factor is beyond reality. It's so yes, they have abundant data. However, their data just shows it's not possible. That's my conclusion. So
Thanks.
that's what I say to them.
Well,
Thanks, Steph.
I was just gonna point out that actually, if I can screen share myself real quick, I want to show people this article from. So I can leave yours up, Steph, real quick. But I think now you should. Okay, so we'll swap over to mine real quick. Great answer, Steph. And I love here. I just want to show the audience this article you have in creation.com. Can you see, gentlemen?
Yep.
Okay, good. So what I like here, Steph, is you point out that the critics' criticism of the magmatic model,
Magmatic
model, there we go, for the origin of salt deposits have been clearly and simply refuted. The I keep screwing that up. Magmatic model fits the evidence well, far better than the evaporation model, which has many insurmountable problems. And not only that, Steph, is in the comment section too. It looks like you can get some criticisms that you easily dismantle. So I find this article fascinating, Steph, and you've done a really, really good job. And I want to make sure everybody checks this one out. So title, clarifying the magmatic, I've mastered it now, model for the origin of salt deposits, answering criticism. So great job, Steph.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Stanley. Yeah.
I guess my next question, Steph, we've all encountered this criticism where the evolutionists, I think they're being disingenuous when they claim we don't publish in peer-reviewed journals. I think you've encountered some criticism in that area, haven't you? You've got some experience in that area.
Yes, I have. Yeah, very sad, but I can share my
Yep, I've got you back on screen now,
yeah,
Steph. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, my salt research started with a visit in a salt mine, and that led to a publication in Journal of Creation and the presentation at NetMag. Well, I told about that. Then I found a professor in the university to help me with this solidification process and with some things. But then in 2014, 2015, I did two presentations at TNO. And TNO is a huge research organization paid by the government of the Netherlands. And they get all the results from mining companies. So when mining companies do density measurements on cores, because mining companies, they take cores out of the ground, and these cores will be tested on density. So that's not something that's hard rock fact, this density. It's taken out kilometers deep, it's taken out, brought to the laboratory, and there they test and register the densities. So I've gathered more than 2,000 densities from their data. And I've used their data, and therefore I was invited to present my data. And they were astonished that I had another view and came up with this volcanic origin of the salt. Because the density of the sediments on top of the salt, they should have led to the pushing up of the salt. That was their story. That the density, the layers on top of the salt were that dense that the salt itself started to rise. But I found out that it was not true. Their story was not correct. And so I was invited, I presented it to this secular journal, Grondborenhamer. That's a Dutch journal, so I wrote this paper in Dutch. And I presented that it was not correct. What I presented was this. So I have more than 2,000 actual densities measured, and I calculated that this overburden that had to push up the salt was less dense than the solid rock salt. The rock salt is a mixture of many salts, and calcium sulfate is an important driver in it, and calcium sulfate is nearly 3,000 kilograms per cube. So this calcium sulfate drives up the density, the average density of rock salt, because all the salt is a mixture of several salts. So this overburden was less dense than the rock salt. So that jeopardized their model. However, at a depth of 2.5 kilometer depth, then you see a transformation, then the overburden becomes more dense. Because what happens with this overburden is all sedimentary rock, is all sediments delivered by the flood. So it's having a high porosity, loads of water in it. But when you have multiple kilometers of it on top of each other, and it's becoming dewatered, the water will rise up in it and it becomes more compressed by its own weight, then you will end up with high porosity still, but they will also start a cementing process. So the porosities will become cemented with calcium carbonate and silicium dioxide. So the porosities will be reduced and will become denser with these other minerals, and then it becomes like concrete. It becomes very dense, and at that moment in time, then it's able to push up your salt. However, at that moment in time, you are already 2.5 kilometers deep, and the sedimentary rock on top of it has become cement, hard rock cement. So you can't go through that in a liquid way. There is no space. How will this salt ever pass a 2.5 kilometer thick wall from which the lower level is cement? This is very strong material, and then so there is a problem. However, if salt is a magma, then the density of this salt, this mixture of salt, is somewhere about 1,800 kilograms per cubic meter, and then you see this salt magma is much less dense than this overburden, and it's easy to protrude in the sediments of the flood. And so I presented that at TNO, where the data came from, and also in this paper in the Grondborenhamer. However, that was, they presented it, it was published, and the peer reviewers, they wrote to me in email, we will certainly publish this, but after publication, the board of the Geology Society, the board of the society, found out, and they became mad. And well, I received an email from a board member that I had misused their high quality journal for creationist work, and it was terrible. And they put on their website that my paper was totally false and shouldn't have been published in their journal. So that was quite sad, to be honest. So that's, yeah. What can I add to
What
that?
else is new?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I bring in data. I meet people that say, well, this is new data, we will certainly publish this. And it's simple, top down. And it was forbidden data. So now it's forbidden geology or something like that. It has never been quoted in any paper. It's just neglected.
Yeah, thank you, Steph. I think we've covered most of the questions, but there's one question in my research. I've encountered some practical applications for the salt domes, and one of the things that I read about was the safe disposal of nuclear waste in chambers. This was proposed because of the impermeable nature of the salt. Can you expand on that and maybe add a few other applications that they could possibly use those huge salt domes for?
Yes, well, of course, this nuclear waste, I had my engineering desk and I was interested in this salt, and I worked for the enrichment of uranium. So I was very interested in it, and I think salt is a very good seal to store your nuclear waste. However, the political issues are immense, and people just don't want it. And we have an example where it went wrong, because in Germany they practiced this. And I entered that mine, by the way. I was in that mine. It was in Germany. And when you make a mine in a salt dome, then you are, well, in this case, in the mine where I was nearly 1 kilometer in the subsurface. And at the level of 1 kilometer in the subsurface, I'm in atmospheric condition. I don't have a special treatment or what. I'm just in atmospheric condition in a mine 1,000 meters in the subsurface. So, but what is the water pressure, the groundwater? Because the mine, the salt dome, is surrounded by sedimentary rock, which is water soaked. It's a high porosity in there, and all these porosities are filled with water. If there is not gas or oil in the porosities, it's filled with water. So this water contains a pressure of 100 bars. 100 bars is available at that depth in the subsurface. So this hydrostatic pressure will find its way into the atmospheric pressure in where the mine is. The mine shaft itself presents only an atmospheric pressure. So there is a difference of atmospheric pressure against 100 bar. And as the mine also is very slowly moving, because the salt, the weight of the salt, the weight of the overburden is pushing this mine, is making the mine room smaller, then this water finds its way finally and will fill up this mine with water. And that's what we don't want to see with nuclear waste. We would like to store it in a dry and safe place. So it is possible. I think it's possible if you do something about this problem. I have some ideas about it, but well, what does it help? There is no political room for nuclear waste in salt mines, not in the Netherlands anyway. I don't think in Germany also. It's
yeah, no one wants to dispose it in their own backyard, do they?
No, they don't want it. So, yeah. And there are other possibilities in mine shafts. I was in a foundation to help a poor region here in the Netherlands, and we would like to make a lift shaft into a salt pillar. However, the costs to make a lift into a salt pillar, you have to dig this hole, and you need to make preventions that the water doesn't go in. So it takes 100 million euros, and so we stopped that project. We didn't have ways to manage, but we would like to make rooms and to make them available. You can make a hotel in it. You can make a laboratory. You can make well in the UK. They have very valuable archive work in it. So you can, if you have, because these rocks are very dry, if you have no water inflow, then these rocks are the driest rock on Earth. So we had many ideas, many plans, but we didn't continue.
Okay, thanks, Steph. I know you're working on some new projects, and we don't want to give too much away because you published a recent paper, and we hope to have a part 3 on this topic. The topic being the marsupial fossil record and how it's not compelling evidence for the KPG flood boundary. Can you give a short synopsis without sort of giving the whole story away, because we won't have any subject to do a part 3 in the series?
Yeah, part 3 is I will touch this in part 3 indeed, because we have two kinds of young Earth creationists. We have you can roughly divide them in two groups. We have the young Earth creationists that say the flood border is between the Mesozoic and the Paleogene. That's well, that's 23 million years ago in the secular timescale. So we have young Earth creationists that say that is the border where the flood ended, and then they say that the Paleogene and the Neogene and the Quarter, all this history has been all these layers of sediments that have been delivered post-flood. Well, I don't agree with that. I think, and I can expand on that next time, that the flood, the first 150 days of the flood ended about at the end of the Mesozoic time. That was the 150 days that the fountains of the Great Deep delivered sediments on top of the continents. And then the other 220 days that this ark with Noah was on top of the Ararat, and it was just sitting there, it was dry, the waters were lowered, and all this 220 days they had to stay in the ark. And in that time, that was a very catastrophic time for the Earth, the Paleogene, Neogene, Quarter was delivered, and the ark was departed at the beginning of what we now call the Holocene, say 12,000 years ago in the secular timescale, but in biblical timescale about 4,300 years ago. So now we have this first group that say, well, this is the flood border, Mesozoic Paleogene. So it's the Cretaceous Paleogene border. If that's they say that is the flood border, and then they come up with all these marsupial fossils that have been found in Paleogene, Neogene, Quarter, and they have been used against my model. So I've addressed that, and I will address that next time. I'll leave it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Standing. Do you have any other questions from the people in the chat?
No, I don't see any other questions. They're in agreement with me that Steph was so thorough. Any objections or challenges that popped up, Steph so thoroughly refuted them and addressed them. So, I mean, you've done an amazing job. This is fascinating. I'm looking forward to our next talk, our next lecture. Steph, you're an incredible blessing. I mean, the work you're doing is awesome. And you've shown here today in just over an hour and a half just how powerful this evidence is for the Genesis flood. What about you, George? Did you? I noticed there was one last question here, but I think that's one we've already asked a couple times, eh?
Regarding correct. There's no need to cover that again. But personally, Steph, it's been a blessing for me to find you and get to know you. It certainly filled in a void that I had in relation to this fossil fuel exploration, and I think a lot of people in the chat and many others that will probably view this video at a later date will probably find it very, very helpful to answer some of these questions that atheists put before us. Personally, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Standing and George, both for these words. And I look forward to what we will accomplish in this team. I'm just new in your team.
Well, we are thrilled to have you part of the team. I mean, your knowledge is amazing, especially on this topic. I've learned so much. I'm going to have to go through and rewatch all of this. This is the kind of video where you want to rewatch a few times just to catch all the little fascinating details stuff. So we're really excited to have you on board the team.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Steph, and thank you, Matt, for looking after the video for us and pausing it at our request.
No problem. Hey, I do have a question though. I have a question about Lake Titicaca. It's about 12,000 feet above sea level. It contains salt water. But the salt water is unique in that it also has aquatic life that's from the sea as well. They say it's from the Andes being pushed up at the same time. But this happened over millions of years ago. But we know that the lake retention time is 1,343 years. Now, how could it still have salt in it? Is it a salt dome perhaps underneath it?
In the Andes, there is, high up in the Andes, there is a salt formation. So this salt formation receives some rainwater and dissolutes and then bring the salt water into this lake.
Got it. Okay. I was just making sure. I made a video on it a while ago. In order to make sure I was right on it. Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this has been a really good time. It's flown by. I want to thank the audience for a lot of good questions. I want to thank, obviously, George, Matt, and Steph for helping to make this possible. I do want to give our guest, Steph, the final words. If you had any final thoughts or final things you wanted to say, Steph, before we shut it down for the day, the floor is yours. Thanks again for being here.
Yeah. No, I don't have final words. I'm glad that I could share this, and I hope that many people will be blessed by it. Because, yeah, and I hope that evolutionists will come back on their thoughts. And
Amen.
This all brings so much damage to the church that the evolutionists, even in the church, there are evolutionists active. And they're spreading their lies and their wrong models, and it's terrible. Yeah. So I hope
It
this
is.
will be a blessing.
Amen.
God bless you, Steph.
God bless you. This will definitely be a blessing. It's I know it's been a blessing to us, and you're right. A lot of times it's about planting that seed. You know, where the atheists are bringing up these arguments that are obviously easily addressed and easily refuted, and I think this is important to be out there for people to see. So yeah, I want to say thank you again. This has been awesome. Thanks to the chat, and I hope everybody enjoyed. Please share, hit that like, subscribe if you have not subscribed. We got a lot of good debates, interviews, and discussions set for the next couple weeks. So we're just getting started. This is a lot of fun, and Standing for Truth is out.
For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.